Thank you most sincerely for joining us on today's episode of Tax Matters. Chiamaka Ohawuchi. In discussions around governance and national development, the term social contract crops up quite regularly. What is social contract? Social contract is a compact or agreement between the ruled and their rulers, defining the rights and duties of each. That is the theme of this episode of Tax Matters. Hajia Aminado is the Director Emerging and Special Tax Department at the FRS. She speaks on social contracts.
Maybe we can just start by saying defining what a tax is. Now, a tax is a compulsory contribution to government revenue levied on individuals or corporations on their income, on their assets, or their consumption. So, for example, you can pay personal income tax, company income tax, capital gains tax, even the electronic money transfer levy, even though that is like a levy, is a transaction tax, and importantly, the value-added tax, which is on consumption. So, all these taxes are paid because there is a social contract between the government and the citizens that come together to form a nation. So this social contract requires that the citizens pay for running the government, and the government then provides certain services that only the government can provide. And in some cases, it also provides services that others can provide, but the government has decided that they are too important to be left to the market. Secondly, we need a good environment with clean air. And that is a pure public good. If I enjoy clean air or I enjoy the services of the military giving me defense, it doesn't stop any other Nigerian from enjoying that. And that is why it has to be done by the government, because it is a public good. If you allow it to the private sector, it cannot work. So that is why government collects taxes in order to be able to provide all these services. So that is why we all pay taxes, so that we get these services that we need in order to run our businesses and have a good life. And that is the social contract that we have. We elect our public officers who then ensure the public servants, like the staff of FIRS, are held accountable for the jobs that we've been given to do. So that is how this cycle works, with the citizens at the top of the ladder.
Prince Clem Agba is the Minister of State for Finance, Budget and National Planning. He speaks further on the subject matter.
In a governance structure, you have the government and then you have the people. The people have got some responsibilities, just as well as government itself has gotten its own responsibility. One of the basic responsibility of government is to ensure that the people are safe. That's providing security, aside from providing the necessary infrastructure to guarantee good and healthy living. Those infrastructures range from road construction to rail construction, airports, hospitals, schools. When it comes to schools, there is a basic dichotomy between what the federal should provide and what the state should provide. For the subnationals, they are basically responsible for basic education, that is primary and secondary, whereas at the federal level, the government is responsible for the tertiary institution. Same thing too for the health sector. The federal government is responsible for tertiary health, while the states are basically responsible for the primary health care. But to do this, government isn't going to use its blood. You understand? Government requires revenue to be able to meet up with this obligation. And the surest way that government can get this revenue is through taxes and levies. Unfortunately, in Nigeria, we seem to have the lowest rates of taxes, and also in terms of revenue to GDP, It's about the lowest in sub-Saharan Africa. So aside from commodities that government could sell, things like our crude, for instance, for which there is no guarantee because it's relied on the world demand for it, the supply for it, and that invariably also affects what the pricing is. And like you can see in 2022, at a time when oil prices are really, really very high, the government is not making any revenue from oil because of the theft that has been taking place and the shorting of production by the oil industry. So the only means of survival has been the non-oil sector, which is basically taxes that have been paid by companies, that CITs. For the states, they rely heavily on the personal income taxes. VAT is another form of tax that is paid, but 85% of this goes to the subnational government. So if we were to rely only on oil, the nation would have been in deep, deep trouble this time.
On what government has done to justify its demand for taxes from the populace?
At a time like this, when revenue are lowest, this government has received the lowest of revenues when compared to every other government, but we have delivered the most in terms of infrastructure. Let me give you an example. When you look at the Alaja, as the Warri rail line to Itape, that's a rail line which construction started about 40-something years ago, but no train ever passed it. This government, without a dime of a loan, resuscitated that rail line, converted it from being purely a cargo rail line, but to both cargo and passengers. And you will recall that the AKK pipelines were moved through that rail line. And that's a lot of savings in terms of damage that would have happened to our roads. This government has constructed the second longest bridge after the third mainland bridge. That is the local Weto Bridge across River Benue. Not many people are aware that such a bridge exists. But you recall during the last flooding, when the Lokoja area was blocked, that was the only access to connect the north to the south. And it had to be used by people because it's a very well-built bridge. If you look at our airports, we have 4 very modern airports now that have been built in Kano, in Abuja, in Port Harcourt, and then in Lagos. And they've all been commissioned by His Excellency, the President. And you will recall that during COVID, we had a special fund of about 500 billion. We are in 52 federal medical centers and teaching hospitals. We have provided 950 million each. In each of these hospitals, we had to build molecular labs. And before then, we only had about 2, or let me call it 2.5 molecular labs in the country. It meant that if someone was suspected to have Lassa fever, you only had to go to Ira Specialist Hospital for diagnosis to be done. You know, you take the sample in Maiduguri or Sokoto or Port Harcourt and take it to Ira. But today, in all of those 52 federal medical institutions, such analysis cannot be done. Aside from the fact that each of these 52 hospitals, 10-bedded ICU units were provided. So that's additional 520 intensive care beds that were provided by the federal government of Nigeria. Personal protective equipment were also provided during the period for these 52 federal medical centers. A lot of dams have been built, a lot of irrigation facilities just to ensure food security. And no government in this country since 1960 has funded the military just the way this government has. And if you look at the platforms that the Nigerian Navy, the Nigerian Air Force now have, you know, the number of equipments, then you will see that taxpayers' money is working. And that is why we want to continue to encourage Nigerian citizens to say that when you have a responsive government like this one that we have, the duty of the citizens is to play their own role and pay their taxes.
This interview continues.
We have a document known as the Modernization Plan that documents how FRS intends to improve its services to end users, and this is a holistic plan. We are looking at the human resources, looking at the processes, we're also looking at the deployment of technology. So we are looking at deploying all the latest technological tools that will enable us to do much better, to perform better. And you can see that this is already yielding results. So this has been going on over the years, but from the advent of this new this management, there has been a renewed effort towards making sure that all our processes are automated. And the vanguard of that automation process is our Tax Pro Max, which is our external application that the taxpayers use to file their returns, to request for their tax clearance certificate, to print out their receipts and withholding credit notes. So what it means now is that taxpayers can carry out all their tax affairs at the comfort of their homes without coming to FIRS. So that has improved the ease of doing business, the ease of compliance, and this is also showing up in our collections.
Do you provide goods and services? Then you must answer these important questions. Are you registered for VAT? Do you charge VAT on the goods and services you provide? Do you keep records of all your transactions? Do you file VAT returns? Do you remit VAT collected to government coffers? If your answer to any of these questions is no, then you are breaking the law. The law demands total compliance. Therefore, you must register for VAT. You must charge VAT on goods and services. You must file VAT returns. And you must remit all VAT collected on behalf of government within 21 days to the bank nearest to you. To do otherwise is a crime punishable everywhere in the world. VAT is prescribed by the law. Do the right thing. Collect and pay VAT. This message is from the FIRS. It pays to pay your tax.
We'll move on by continuing to share with you the second installment of the TETFUND story, which began last episode.
The education tax is 2.5% of a company's profit. It is imposed on all registered companies in Nigeria. The Federal Inland Revenue Service, FIRS, is mandated to collect this tax on behalf of the Tertiary Education Trust Fund, which in turn disburses it to the relevant public tertiary institutions. The fund has in 10 years amounted to 2.5 trillion naira spent on infrastructure and staff development in public universities, polytechnics and colleges of education. With more effort, more companies are complying in paying this tax. We are seeing improved funding to our tertiary education institutions as a result of the education tax.
The AMYMAT College of Education, Azare, in Bauchi State, has benefited so much from taxpayers' taxes in the areas of staff development, infrastructure, ICT, library development, and research.
We know that one of the main sources of government funds, finances, is through remittances of tax. And Federal Polytechnic Okana, being solely sponsored by the federal government, we know with what we are doing that these taxes has helped a lot. The structures that you see at the main campus, about 95% of them are state fund sponsored infrastructure. Without the taxpayers remitting what are expected of them. TETFUND in particular would not have the fund that it has been disbursing to tertiary institutions. So Federal Polytechnic Ghana, with what has happened in the past 3 years, is an institution that should be used to let the taxpayers know that whatever taxes they have paid does not go for nothing.
There is no society in the world that tax doesn't play a major role in sources of funds. In actual fact, when you go to Europe, they really depend on tax. And in such societies, you will see that on the pound or on the unit, the tax is almost about 25% or 30% regime. This university in particular, our presence in all the states of the Federation and in some local governments of the Federation, in terms of study centers, physical presence, has been largely due to the intervention of TETFUND.
There's a strong synergy between FIRS and TETFUND, because it is whatever that is collected and remitted to TETFUND that TETFUND in turn redistribute to tertiary institutions. In Kogi State Polytechnic, we have a series of TETFUND projects on our campus. I appreciate TETFUND for all the interventions that they have put in place before and during our tenure. And I appreciate FIRS, because it's not easy to collect tax.
In ensuring a quantum leap in research outcomes between 2020 and 2021, the federal government, through the TETFUND Board of Trustees, gave approval for the sum of 12 billion naira for the establishment of 12 centers of excellence, 2 in each of the 6 geopolitical zones, at a cost of 1 billion naira per center. Bayero University Kano and Abubakar Tafawa Balewa University Bauchi, among other universities in Nigeria, are beneficiaries of the education tax, which the FIRS is able to collect for the use of the Tertiary Education Trust Fund.
We have been selected as one of the 12 universities that benefited from this intervention. Our Center of Excellence is a Center of Excellence for renewable energy. And we have been given this grant of 1 billion, and first tranche has been released, and we are working towards actualizing what the funds has been given for.
ATBU is currently hosting 3 centers of excellence. 2 are funded by the TETFUND, the Center of Excellence on Food Security, with special emphasis on dairy research and development, and then the Center of Excellence on Endourology. These 2 centers of excellence in ATBU Bauchi have gone to a great length in providing the kind of services that centers of excellence are required to provide.
Post-COVID-19 saw the world grappling with energy and food shortages. Nigeria is among countries developing ways of providing local solutions to this global problem. This cow is one out of many herds being reared for meat and milk by Abubakar Tafawa Balewa University in Bauchi State, Nigeria. They are bred specifically for crossbreeding with the local breed. The idea is to triple local capacity in meat and milk production. With surplus feeds all year round and convenient accommodation for herds, the assurances for better milk and meat production is not in doubt. The funding for all this is coming from the efforts of the Federal Inland Revenue Service in tax collection, and evidence of the impact the taxpayers' money can do. Hence the call for prompt payment of taxes. Abubakar Tafawa Balewa University is not too far away from the Abubakar Tatari Ali Polytechnic in Bauchi State. It is one of the institutions that have established departments and faculties of global standards. This mass communication department here runs a radio station that transmits to the Polytechnic and host communities. Like Musa and other locals within the host community, the radio station, aside creating sense of community through programs in the local language, also provides a source of entertainment, validation, and awareness on issues that border on civic responsibilities.
Ana amfani da wannan haraji ana taimakon makarantu da shi, akan gina ajujuwa ne da kayan karatu har da wa'anda za a bukata. Mai sauraro da fatan kaji wannan kira kuma za ka yi amfani da shi, wanda bai ji ba kuma ya sanar da wanda ya ji kuma ya sanar da wanda bai ji ba.
Our interview with the registrar, Abdullahi Alhaji Adamu, on the impacts of the TETFUND's intervention in Tatari Ali Polytechnic Bauchi was conducted inside ATAP FM studio. The studio manager decided to go live.
The presence of TETFUND intervention in Abuja Tatari Polytechnic Bauchi cannot be overemphasized. Indeed, the massive infrastructure development by the TETFUND right from its inception to date is what developed this institution to the present state. Indeed, the intervention is what brought the Polytechnic from what I can refer as a moribund, glorified technical college to what one can clearly see today. Let me give kudos to taxpayers in general in Nigeria, including workers like me who pay that tax should not be avoided, because tax is an integral part of what support government in supporting agencies like TETFUND, who by extension support education massively throughout the country.
The students of this state-owned institution are exposed to practical hands-on teaching in the field of broadcast and journalism.
Once it registers, you cannot believe it.
The department also has a standard, well-equipped television broadcast studio. Funding for research and development is a deliberate policy of the federal government. Through disbursements from the Education Tax Fund collected by the Federal Inland Revenue Service, the production of this electric car at the Federal Polytechnic Nekede in Owerri, Imo State was possible. This invention is in line with the new global automotive policy of producing eco-friendly and energy-efficient vehicles powered by electricity and renewable energy.
I have always had the dream, the wish to produce a car. Again, thinking about the present damages to our environment by our vehicles, automobiles that use fossil fuel, I found it, I saw the opportunity to write a proposal to produce this project, and TETFUND approved it, and so the work started. It's been very interesting seeing this coming to being.
We were privileged to drive this four-wheeled electric-powered vehicle. With the much that the Federal Inland Revenue Service is doing in meeting and surpassing its annual revenue target, more funding is pouring in to support capacity building programs for beneficiary institutions. This is aimed at improving global competitiveness and visibility, which are already translating into specialized skills being developed by beneficiary higher institutions of learning in Nigeria.
Taxpayers' money in action. The third and concluding part of this feature will come your way next episode. If you have any reaction or any inquiry on any matter on this episode or any matter whatsoever regarding taxes and taxation, get in touch with us on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube, by text or by calling. And remember, you can reach out directly to the FRS through the contact center. Thank you for watching. See you next week.